Excellent. Thank you, Kate. Welcome, everyone. I know we'll have a few more people coming to join because we're all looking forward to hearing from Hallie Ephron so much. So I'm Nev. I'm chapter president for the New York chapter of Mystery Writers of America. Hearty welcome to everyone. A couple of quick notes here. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Kate is our program chair. She's got such a fantastic lineup for us, and we are so honored to have Hallie here today. We're going to try and put an attachment into the chat. So if you see that come up, feel free to click on it, and it will open up another Word document or PDF maybe, and that will be useful for you as well. That's like a little worksheet there to help us through. And thank you for that, Hallie. One additional piece, we thank you all. Many of you came to the uh, annual, all member meeting yesterday. So thank you for attending. We had an exciting meeting. And one change that we announced then, which I'm going to put to the board to vote on, is that we would like to move Revels to November instead of December. It's our holiday party, but we are planning to have it in the first or second week of November. Just better weather, better prices, and hopefully better traffic in Manhattan. So that's the thinking behind it. And we'll find a nice location and announce it. So hopefully you can all make it. And plus ones are welcome. So bring your significant other, and we'd love to meet, socialize, and just have a good time. That's in November. We have lots and lots of events coming up, before that. So stay tuned to groups.io, stay tuned to the website, and you'll see all of those announcements come up. The next thing that we have is actually a Bridgewater, Central Jersey get together in Raritan. It's free. If you feel like coming to it, it's just a meet and greet social gathering. We have a free space, so that's really nice. And that's been announced on groups.io. After that, we have a walk in Lambertville. That has a small cost of $10, but the Historical Society, we have a tour guide that will take us through and tell us a little bit about the history of Lambertville. And it's a walking tour, so it should be comfortable, a decent pace, not a super fast hike or anything like that. Lots of other things, but you can, catch up on them as we announce them on groups.io. Okay, let's get to this eagerly awaited crime craft. Kate is our program chair. Kate, you want to do the introduction? Shall I read it?
Sure, you can read it.
Okay, great. So Hallie Ephron is a New York Times best-selling author of 16 books, including 11 mystery novels and Edgar-nominated Writing and Selling Your Mystery Novel. Great book. Lee Child called it the best how-to guide I've ever seen. That's quite a recommendation there. Her book Never Tell a Lie was adapted for film. She's a five-time finalist for the Mary Higgins Clark Award. For 12 years, she wrote Boston Globe's On Crime column, winning American Crime Writers League Award for book reviewing, the American Crime Writers League. She teaches at writing workshops and conferences in the US and abroad and blogs daily at Jungle Red Writers. And when I was a pretty new writer a few years ago, Hallie and her group there in Jungle Red Writers were kind enough to host me on a daily column. So thank you for that. I remember your kindness. I think I also met you briefly at Malice Domestic, where again you were very kind to chat with me and other newbies like me at the time. So we remember you fondly. So welcome, and we're excited to hear from you.
Okay, well, I'm excited to be here. I've spoken a number of times for MWA New York, and I love New York. I mean, not the cliched New York. I've lived in New York, went to college in New York. My sisters, because my father's, everybody I know and that I care about is in New York. So why aren't I in New York? Good question. Uh, But at any rate, I want to start with a caveat, okay? I have a lot of opinions. A lot of my opinions grow out of having been a book reviewer. I've read a lot of books. I've reviewed a lot of books. I have helped a lot of writers with their writing. I have a lot of opinions. That doesn't mean I'm right for you, okay? So I just want you to keep a firm grip on your own sense of who you are and what you're writing. These books are too hard to write and get right and to sell. That is for sure. So but on the other hand, I also feel like why not take some, advice from someone and see if it works for you. Okay, so just take it all with a grain of salt, see what sounds like it's useful. And I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to ask either Nev or anybody who can. Nev, I think you, if there are questions that pop up, I won't be seeing them because I'm going to be focusing on talking. So interrupt me if it seems like a question that a lot of people would have. Okay. And
We'll do that. We'll
I'm
wait
hoping there'll
until
be
you're
time.
completed if you want, and then at the end, I'll read out whatever questions
That's
there are.
perfect. Perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen and hopefully send request. Is somebody getting that?
Yep, I got it.
Okay. Thanks, Kate.
So it should have been allowed. Let's try. You want to try it again?
Share. Oh, there we go. Here it is. Share. Oh, yeah. That's it, right? You got it?
Perfect.
Okay. So here's what we're going to be talking about: beginnings and endings, crafting a page turner. How do you get the reader when they've just finished reading something to just go just one more chapter and then just one more chapter after that? So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that's related to how do you propel your book forward. This is the required screen that I hope you all have on your presentations, your books. These are mine, some of mine, and then my wonderful writing and selling your mystery novel, which is in a revised and expanded edition. Okay, so what makes readers keep turning pages? It kind of depends on what kind of book you're writing. So it's a good idea to have a sense, at least, of what tradition you're following. So a mystery or a thriller or a suspense novel are a little different, but they all pose unanswered questions. And that unanswered question thing is going to be the theme. You're going to hear that over and over and over again in my talk. But the questions really for a mystery are who did it? That's usually the question. A thriller, it's more what's going to happen next. There's that propulsive, not a discovery, not an examining of this, that, and the other, but a propulsion. And in a suspense novel, the question is usually, what's going on here? You know, is it what it seems? And so it's nice to know, not that you can't write a book. I mean, many mystery novels start out as a mystery, and somewhere around the end of Act Two, we find out who did it, and then it turns into a thriller, and we're trying to keep it from happening again. So they're not mutually exclusive. There's kind of a Venn diagram with all of them intersecting, but it's nice to know which tradition you're following. Okay, so the elements of a page turner. This took me a long time to realize, and I know it's going to sound really basic. A main character with a goal the reader cares about. Okay, it's not who did it. That's not what makes a page turner. It's the main character caring about them reaching the goal. And usually the main character is the sleuth. Now, it might be a detective or it might be the victim's mother-in-law. It could be many things. It's your book. So the sleuth in your book depends on what kind of book you're writing and who your investigator is. That's the main character usually, with a goal that the reader cares about. So I'm going to talk later about how you make the reader care about that main character's goal. A scene structure, and I'm going to talk later about scene structure. Why scenes? That builds and grows. Secrets and surprises frequently revealed. So that's the answering of the questions and posing new ones. And escalating stakes, it's the old cliche, you put in a ticking clock somewhere around the end of Act Two. And that caveat is I have there just to remind myself to be sure to say, take everything I suggest with a grain of salt. You're going to write your own book, okay? And also that fire hose. I apologize in advance. I'm going to be giving you a lot of content in a small amount of time, so buckle up. Okay, so I would just want to lay the groundwork for what we're talking about here. This applies to Greek drama. It applies to Shakespearean plays. It applies to everything. The 3-act structure with the first act, second act twice as long as the first act, and a third act as long as the first. So it's 4 quarters really. That's why the mushy middle. You always talk about the mushy middle. Well, it's because it's so big. And it's easy to start things and it's easier to slam bang wrap things up. It's that middle where things tend to bog down. So I'd always try to plot my novels in terms of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. It's nice if you know what they are before you're setting out. What's going to start the mystery? What's going to happen at the end of Act 1 that's going to be reversal? What's going to happen in the middle of Act 2, because Act 2 is so long? What's going to happen at the end of Act 2 that's going to be the pit of despond, nothing is the way it looks. And then in the final act, coming back, roaring back, and usually confronting the victim, not the victim, confronting the villain. And then everybody sails off into the sunset. So that's just the general structure of almost any novel. Having said that, I once interviewed Michael Connelly, and I described this 3-act structure, and I asked him if he thinks about it, and he says never. So I like it. It makes sense of chaos for me. Okay, now the thing is, these books are really hard to write, and that's because the story in those 4 acts is happening along with the protagonist taking a journey. The protagonist has a past that is influencing why he cares or she cares about solving this mystery. Why does he care? Because the character's going to put themselves in danger and is going to do crazy things. And if you have to have her go into the haunted house, then you better have a really good reason for setting that up, and you can. So the protagonist's journey is playing out along with the investigation of the crime. And the protagonist's journey, hang on. I once had my first novel, just a very quick story, was rejected by St. Martin's. Wonderful editor at St. Martin's said that when she evaluates a novel for acquisition, she wants a main character, especially a series opening. She wants a main character, where the reader cares about what happened to the person before the book opens and cares about what's going to happen to that protagonist after the book ends. Now, of course, what she was saying was, I didn't care about your protagonist. So in editing that book, I gave the protagonist a dead wife. Now, dead wives abound in crime fiction. They are in everything, along with dead babies, dead wives, all these backstories that give your protagonist a reason to need to get it right this time. And that pushes them to do stuff that a sane person wouldn't do. The rest of us would call the police. But your characters might do that, and it might, then hopefully they'll have to either work with the police or work on their own. Okay, so moving on. Let me see how I'm doing in terms of time. Where to begin? Good. I'm keeping time on myself because I want this to be an hour. Where to begin? So often we set the book story in motion with the body, but that is not necessary. I get a lot of questions from writers. Do I have to drop the body in the first chapter? And the answer is no. All you have to do in the first chapter is make the person turn the page and start reading chapter 2. That is your goal, is to get them interested enough to keep reading. So there's all kinds of ways of opening a book. But regardless of how you do it, you want to ask an unanswered question. Make the reader want to keep reading. And it helps if you know how your book is going to end. You don't have to, because you can edit this thing. But an unanswered question in the beginning is really what you need. And here are some opening lines from some of my favorite books. Julia Spencer Fleming's In the Bleak Midwinter opens, "It was a hell of a night to throw away a baby." So immediately, unanswered question. Huh? Who's throwing a baby? Where are we? What's happening here? Dick Francis in Bone Crack. If you want to look just at opening lines, go to the library, go to the Dick Francis shelf, and pull down books one after the other. They all have great opening lines. This one is from Bone Crack. "They both wore thin rubber masks, identical." So immediately we want to know what's happening here. And then I love Alan Bradley's The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, more of a cozy mystery. "It was black in the closet as old blood. They had shoved me in and locked the door." Now, it helps when you find out that the character is a 10-year-old with pigtails and that she's narrating this. But you can see you don't have to have a dead body in the beginning. You just have to intrigue the reader. Okay. I'm sorry, I cannot figure out how to turn that off. Did you see that flash up in the right corner? Yeah, sorry. I'm in a sprint group with my Jungle Red Rider pals, and so they chime in, and I haven't figured out how to stop it. Anyway, never mind. So what you need is an inciting incident that poses an unanswered question that sets the story in motion. That's really, and it should be a really good question. Why would the baby be left on the steps of the church? So, having said that, one of the most challenging parts of your book to write is the opening, because you have to have this great event happening that's going to make the reader ask a question, want to keep turning the pages, and you have to introduce the characters, you have to establish the narrative voice, you have to set up the setting, the situation, the conflict, be true to the genre, that know your audience. Are you writing a cozy? Are you writing a PI? It should feel like that. What's the context for this? Is it the banking industry? Is it the museums? Where are we? Are there going to be themes in the book? And they should start in the beginning and tone. All of this in the beginning. No wonder that first chapter, I write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite that opening scene, because you want just enough and not too much. Because you're going to have the whole rest of the book to establish, say, your main character's backstory, but you want to hint at it and make them interested enough to keep reading. So that's the challenge of opening narrative. It is really a bear. Here are some places not to begin. Too much establishing narrative. So a backstory dump. In other words, all this stuff about what happened before whatever it is your opening is about, what the weather is like, what the industry is like, what happened a year ago, all of who your main character is, what they look like. All of this stuff is necessary, but not so much that just enough to get traction, to get going. Because of course, the second problem is not enough establishing narrative. If your characters are floating and you haven't given them a setting to be anchored with, and a time frame and relationships, again, the reader is just going to give up. They're just going to stop reading. They all has to work together. I advise against a crowd scene. It's hard enough to introduce one character, never mind 3 characters. If you're going to have a cocktail party, you have like 15 characters. That's crazy. Just stick with a couple of characters in that opening, or you're going to lose the reader. You know, they're going to start making lists of, you ever do that? You start reading a book and then you start listing the names of the characters on one of the pages because you're losing track of who's who. Yeah, and don't get me started on naming characters, because really think about naming your characters so that they sound different, not just look different. The rush to drop the body now, some books are fine with the body drop in the opening scene, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to rush to it. The prologue Band-Aid. Now that is a scene I see in a lot of books that people have labored over and for which they have a critique group. And the critique group said to them, I got interested in your book on page 60. And the whole beginning is just, you know, backstory and setting. And I really had to make myself read it. So what do? They take the scene that people like, they plop it in the beginning of the book. Then their next chapter starts 3 weeks earlier, and they establish all the stuff it's a Band-Aid. It's not the right way to fix that problem. The right way is something else that is interesting and a good place to start. Stealing your story's thunder. I've done that in a book. Sometimes you don't know what you're stealing. You know, in the beginning of writing a novel, sometimes you don't know who did it. Even though you think you know who did it, I'm almost always wrong. And somewhere around the end of Act 2, I realize that there's a much better villain that I had right under my nose. And now I have to go back and fix it so that I don't make it too obvious, because it would have been obvious to the reader if it wasn't obvious to me. So you want to be sure, and that this is more of an editing thing when you go back, that you don't give anything away in that opening, but you plant the breadcrumbs, the seeds, some stuff that looks unimportant when you write it the first time, but then becomes more important and gets repeated as the story moves forward. False advertising, bait and switch. You know, I remember reading a novel that was purportedly a cozy, and it begins with narcotics guys taking the fingernails off their victims, their live victims. Now, that is not a cozy opening. You know, if your audience is cozy, then make it feel cozy from the beginning. If your audience is looking for, if your main character is a cop and it's a police procedural, it should feel like one from the beginning. So be careful about, sometimes we write the opening because we want to grab the reader, but it doesn't go with the rest of the book. And then your readers feel gypped. They stop reading because this isn't the book I thought it was going to be. You know, you want your opening. There will be people who don't like your work. That is okay. You know, what you want is to find the people who do like your work, like it from page 1 and keep reading. Okay. Your opening. Think about, what do you want it to do? What are you trying to establish? And what are the questions you're asking? What do you want to establish? And what questions do you want it to raise? Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about, how am I doing here? I'm just checking my time. Oh, we're good. Okay. Okay, so scenes. When I was first writing my first book,
Hi.
I had
Hi, I'm on a Zoom.
Oops, hello. When I was writing my first book, I had a little yellow sticky on my computer that said, write scenes. Because before I started writing fiction, I had no idea what a scene was. Scenes are the atomic particles of novels, not chapters. Okay. Chapters are the way that you group scenes together in some way that makes sense and gives permission to the reader to turn out the light. That's how I think of chapters. But the scene is the organic particle of the book. It's action that takes place at a particular time in a particular setting. So it's continuous action. Sometimes it's more than a chapter. Sometimes a scene could go on for 2 chapters. Chapters are the breaks that you put in the book because your publisher expects it, and because the reader needs the break. You know, it's why you don't put no paragraph breaks in a page of text, because people look at that and they think, I'm not reading that. It's too dense. So it's letting air into your book. You know, white space, blank pages are part of your novel. They're not extraneous to it. So a scene is action that takes place at a particular time in a particular setting. I think of it almost in movie genre, you know, that it's if you had a camera set up and you're watching this thing, when you had to move the camera and change the background, that's when the scene is over, but also in continuous time. So usually a scene has these elements. And the first one is the one that I most often see left out: establishing narrative. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but readers need their characters not to be floating. We need to know right away, within the first 10 words, who's narrating, where are we, how much time has passed, and generally what's going on. You know, the next morning she was in the dentist's office. That's it. You're done. That's all it takes. But if you leave it out, your characters are floating, and the reader has no idea and gives up, is what they do. And of course, that's what we don't want. So a scene, we have a little bit of establishing narrative. Something happens, something changes, and then at the end we move on and try to make sense. So generally speaking, that is the structure of most scenes. It's like a mini story arc, because in a novel, it's the same thing, only on a bigger scale. The beginning of a novel, establishing narrative, the middle, stuff happens, stuff changes, and then we get the resolution at the end. But in a scene, it's the same, but in miniature. Now, here's the thing. You want to write scenes that hook and grab. That the ending of one scene hooks in some way to the start of the next scene. So it might be an unanswered question that gets either reframed in the next at the opening of the next scene, or not. But you know, the thing that you want to be careful of is a scene ending that goes like this: and you couldn't believe what happened next. Okay, what's wrong with that? It's just stupid. It's I don't know how else to frame it. It's not subtle. Yeah. But that is basically what you want to say, even though that's not the right way to say it. That's a huge cliche to say, and he couldn't believe his eyes, or whatever that is. And then starting the next scene with, there on the table was a snake, or whatever it is that's coming next. But you want in some way to hook and grab. You know, watch movies and think about when one scene ends and another scene begins. Very often, one scene will end with a character going out the door, and the next scene will open with a different character coming in the door. One scene will end with the phone ringing. The next one will start with a character answering. There's this continuity. And so think about, you know, how you can end, where you can end. There's a rule, kind of, in movie making that says, start the scene as late as possible, end the scene as early as possible. In other words, don't write your way into a scene if you're writing a mystery, because we want it to be exciting. And don't let it piddle off at the end. One of the things that I usually do when I'm editing is I just look at scene beginnings and scene endings, and I see where I can trim and make it more taut. Also depends on the voice that you're writing in. I mean, if you're, you know, it is dependent somewhat on the kind of narrator that you're creating. But generally speaking, you want this continuity, this feeling that your story is moving forward with each scene break. So here's an example. One scene ends, black space gaped between the open door and the jamb. And that double space indicates a scene break, or you can put in a chapter break. And then the next one starts, through the gap I could make out disordered shadows and odd luminescence like moonlight on water. So this through the gap is a making sense. It's considering what's happened before and trying to show the reader how the main character is making sense out of it. Whereas the end of the scene is just a punch, really. So I wanted to, I hope some of you have this, the handout. But if you don't, I have it here on the screen. What I wanted to use this for is to ask you to think about, where would you break this up into scenes? This is a summary, okay? This is a summary of an unwritten book that I haven't written yet. Okay, I'm gonna read it. And as I read it, think about, where would you put a scene break? Here's the summary. Concerned when lawyer Bill Felon fails to show up in court, his friend and colleague, PI Jason Armitage, goes to Felon's apartment to look for him. Jason finds Felon's porch in the parking lot outside. Outside must be his apartment. The engine is cool. Jason goes to Felon's apartment. The door is ajar. Cautiously, he enters. He checks out the kitchen, the living room. Everything seems normal. He notices an acrid smell. He enters the bedroom. Felon is lying on the bed, holding a pistol, a bullet wound to the head. Jason gets out his phone to call the police when he hears a toilet flush. The bathroom door opens and a man wearing a ski mask emerges. They struggle. Jason grabs the gun, but the man bashes him in the head and it's lights out. Jason wakes up in an ambulance. At first, he can't recall what happened. Then he remembers finding his friend dead in what looked like a suicide. Jason tries to visualize the intruder he saw coming out of the bathroom and wonders why the man only hit him in the head and didn't kill him. Then he realizes that his own clothes are covered in blood, his fingerprints are all over his friend's gun, and the police officer leaning over him is reading him his Miranda rights. Okay, so that is not one scene. Okay, but there are many, many ways that you could break up the scene and many ways that you could write it. Can we do a Q&A? Is it possible?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Sure. Who wants to suggest where they would break? I wrote down 3 spots where I would break the paragraph.
Tell us. Go ahead. Where would you break it?
Well, not to hog the limelight here. If anyone else has ideas there,
We can
feel
do more
free
than
to
one
speak up, guys.
Go ahead, Nev.
Okay, I will. Sure. So I wrote down smell. So, the beginning, we've got right up till he goes to the apartment. Yeah, he notices an acrid smell. I would stop the first paragraph, first chapter there. And
Yeah.
then the second one, he's entering and such. And I would stop when the man in the ski mask emerges, because that's a great hook for a chapter. Then there's a fight scene maybe, and I have lights out. I thought that might be a good spot, but if that's too quick, like if we've a 2-page chapter, that wouldn't work. I would keep going a little bit, maybe put not a chapter break, but the scene break, just
Right.
the 3 asterisks for a little gap. That's just me, but this is exciting in itself, so thank you.
Okay. Who else has other ideas about that? We'll do one more.
Yeah, I thought maybe after the toilet flush.
Yeah.
And then you go into the next chapter and you have the man wearing the ski mask and they fight and it's lights out and then break there and then the ambulance would be the next.
Right. That would be a good way to do it. There are a lot of ways of doing it. Anybody have another idea?
And then Jeannie in the chat wrote that she would start she would start with him waking up in the ambulance.
Ooh.
Start with him waking up in the ambulance.
Yeah,
That's the-
and then the earlier paragraphs would become past tense.
Oh, gosh. I don't think I would do that,
Okay,
but, and, because it takes the juice out of it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I
You
like to
could
be in the
convince me.
moment. So Hallie, I'm with you. I like to be in the moment and I like to follow along with my character.
Right, right, right. It does depend somewhat on the kind of book you're writing. It also
Okay,
depends on where in the book this happens. So if this happened in the beginning of a book, I would do an entire scene of Bill showing up in court and driving to his friend's apartment and parking, because that would allow me to establish the relationship between those characters, what the neighborhood is like, why he's worried that his friend didn't show up. It allows me to do a lot of backstory. On the other hand, if this is late in the book and the reader already knows all that, you go through it lickety split. So where you are in the book is going to affect how you break up your scenes and what you're going to dramatize and what you're going to summarize. Summary in the beginning of a book is deadly.
I agree.
Yeah, and readers just tune it out. So you
Mhm.
have to dramatize as much as you can. But at any rate, the point is that Jeannie might be right for her book doing it that way. It's partly your style, how you're going to break it up and where you're going to break your scenes. It also makes a difference whether you're writing a mystery or a thriller or a suspense, how you structure it. But what you want to think about are these turning points. He notices the acrid smell. When I actually wrote this scene, I also had him walking down the hall and expecting to hear the dog barking, and there's no dog. So that I had a lot of foreshadowing in this scene. And anyway, think about how you're breaking things up into scenes. Sometimes it's good to start with a summary like this rather than trying to actually write it, to break them up and then write them. But again, that's your style. Some people just hit the ground running. They just write. But then come back and think about, have you structured this so that the reader is pulled along, asking questions over and over that get answered and some that don't. Okay. And I talked about this. Where does it matter? Okay. So let me see how I'm doing.
You have about 20 minutes left.
Okay. But you don't know how much talk I have left.
Oh, there you go.
It's supposed to be 6:30 and it's 6:39. Okay. So one of the things I like to think about when I'm writing a book is plot building arcs. And generally speaking, you try to build suspense with questions. In this case, what happened to his friend? Where is his friend? That's the first question in that sequence. Then the action, he goes in, he sees his friend, he gets hit. And then reflection, he's being questioned by the he's being read his Miranda rights. And as you move through a novel, the suspense and the action sequence get bigger, and the reflections more or less answer questions. Whereas in the beginning, the reflection asks questions over and over again. And then in the middle, we're kind of dismissing wrong answers and raising new questions. But I like to think of it as building waves in the novel and growing bigger with the stakes rising. I think I've got that in there. So suspense and unanswered questions are what keep readers turning pages. Here's there's a really good article by Lee Child on writing suspense. It's in the New York Times archive if you want to look it up. He says, ask or imply a question at the beginning of the story, and then we delay the answer. It's so simple. And but it isn't, of course. It's just the way he says it that makes it simple. But I think that is a very useful way of thinking about it. Suspense is created by delaying the answer to questions that the reader wants to know the answer to. So, he says, as novelists, we should ask or imply a question at the beginning of a story, and then we should delay the answer, page to page, paragraph to paragraph, line to line, even within single sentences. Imply a question first, and then answer it second. The reader learns to chase, and the momentum becomes unstoppable. Well, they certainly do in a Lee Child book. I don't know about in mine. We need to bring the same simple principle to our book. Someone killed someone else. Who? You'll find out at the end of the book. Something weird is happening. What? You'll find out at the end of the book. Something has to be stopped. You'll find out at the end of the book. You notice that's mystery, suspense, and thriller. That he's broken it down into those three kinds of questions. So I think that's a very useful way to think about writing your novel. I let me see, how long is this? Ugh,
It's long.
long. Yeah. Let me just talk about it briefly. We're not going to do the whole thing. Normally, if I have you in front of me and you're and I've got your imprisoned in my classroom, I would have this on pages and you could write on it and think about it. But I just want you to think about how is Michael Connelly implementing that, ask a question and delay the answer. Bosch's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw that he was in an empty bunk room that opened on a central passageway running the length of the hull. The only light came from the overhead hatch all the way down in the bow. Between Harry and that point were 6 compartments, 3 on each side, going down the length of the passageway. The last hatch on the left was standing open. Bosch got up, stuck one of the guns back in his belt so he would have a free turn. He started to move, the remaining gun up and ready. Okay, so just in that paragraph, all of that front stuff, that's establishing narrative. You need it to be able to make the action work, which comes almost immediately. He's in action here. And what's the question that he raises? Why is the one hatch standing open? We want to read, we keep continuing. Each where'd we go? Each hatch had a 4-point system for storing and sealing. Arrows stenciled on the rusting steel told Bosch which way to turn each handle to unlock and open the compartment. He moved down the passageway, checking the compartments one by one. There was a putrid smell in each compartment that had nothing to do with the catch the vessel once hauled. This boat carried human cargo. And again, we have establishing narrative, the 4-point, all this detail stuff that we tolerate because it's exciting to figure out why is there a smell and what is that smell and what does it mean? Of course, we don't know that Bosch is searching for his daughter, which goes back to at the beginning I talked about. You have to give the reader a reason to be rooting for your protagonist, something that he's screwed up in the past that he's going to get right this time. And you see it in every one of the Harry Bosch novels. And so it goes on. But I think one of the useful things to do is to read novelists like Lee Child, like Michael Connelly, and read it as a writer, thinking about what is he doing here? Why is he doing it this way? How is he doing it? And then try it. You can extrapolate the technique. Try it yourself in your own book if you can think of places where the same technique might work. I'm going to move on. What if the reader knows something that the viewpoint character does not? So this is something that you see in a lot of thrillers, is we have more than one viewpoint character. And so the character comes out of his apartment in the morning, He goes for his paper. He falls into a hole that someone has dug in front of his house. That's one way to tell that story. Another way is the night before, we're in the head of the villain who's digging the hole and covering it up and going away. And then in the next chapter, we have our hero having coffee, looking outside, seeing the newspaper is there. He goes outside. It's a whole different dynamic in terms of how you feel propelled in a different story. So if the reader knows something that the character does not, it adds another layer of unanswered questions. And it's a technique that, not surprisingly, you're going to find more in thrillers. This is a perfectly tailored technique for a thriller because the reader's going to say, don't go in there, don't do that, don't do this, or that's okay, he's okay, you don't need to be afraid. We've got that push-pull going on in the head of the reader. So if you are writing a thriller, consider multiple viewpoints because it is a way of adding another dimension to the book. Not necessary, but it is a way of increasing. On the other hand, it reduces the surprise factor because the reader knows more than the character. So you don't get the same punch that you do when you reveal who the murderer is. So it pays to think about what it is that you're writing. Here are some tools to tighten suspense, slow down, darkness and shadows. Here's where weather is your friend, not your enemy. You can use the weather to echo or the way the weather feels. Amp sensory details. Bring the camera or the viewpoint up close so that we're right in the gut of the person who's narrating. Something that is not quite right. So this you saw in the Harry Bosch excerpt, you know, the smell. Something that is not quite right. I once wrote a scene, the guy opens the door of an apartment and the phone is off the hook, or the water is running in the bathroom. You know, all of these things give you what's going on here. Ask an unanswered question. Make the ordinary feel ominous. The pregnant pause. Think about white space in your novel. What are you going to put on a line by itself? And that's something I didn't point out to you in the, let me just go back there for a second. Here we go. There was no response. He moved back to the hatch and tilted his head to listen. There was only the sound of the engines running now. He banged the heel of one of the guns loudly on the metal hatch. Maddie, he called out. Maddie, are you there? There was no response. There's a reason that he put there was no response on a line all by itself. And it's just a 4-word sentence. Think about where you place those turning points, those points where you're answering a question that you have asked. And why put it alone on a line? Because readers skip over stuff in the middle of paragraphs. That's how we read. And our readers are particularly annoying because they're impatient. They skip ahead. And so if you want something to stick out, to show a turning point, make it short and put it on a line by itself. Okay, isolate a phrase on a line. That's where I was saying. The ticking clock tightens suspense, raise the stakes. You have more people in danger. Revealing something the character doesn't know. This is multiple narrators. And jump cut. It's you can tighten suspense by having, you know, one character's in the cave tied up to a chair. The water is rising. The other character is outside in the field, just outside the cave, looking for them. And we go back and forth from the two characters' point of view. And the guy in the cave knows what's going on in the cave. The guy outside the cave knows what's going on outside the cave. And it allows you to introduce a lot of tension if you want. You can have unanswered questions on both sides. Okay, tools to loosen suspense. Pull the camera back. All of a sudden, be looking at the scene as if you're, a camera from the second floor of a building down the street. And you're looking at what's happening, way pulled back. Setting and description slow things down. So for instance, if you have a character who's going to get pushed off a cliff, okay, and early in the book, you want to write a scene where that character takes that walk safely. And he's walking his dog, and he sees how steep the cliff is, and he sees the ocean, and blah, blah, blah. And then later, when he's going to be walking it at night, God knows why. Why do we have our characters do what we have them do? The reader replays that because they know it, and you don't have to slow things down by re-describing the scene. To loosen suspense, put setting and description where you want it to be more relaxed. Summaries are lethal to forward momentum. You want to absolutely use them, but use them sparingly and make sure you don't have a lot of it. Okay, like a paragraph or two. Okay, but if it's a page or two, you're going to lose your readers. They're just not going to go along with you. Tools to loosen suspense is reflection. Give the character a thought. Give the narrator a thought. And then a detour into backstory, flashback. And Jeannie, this is why I wasn't crazy about your suggestion of, is because that's exactly what you're suggesting there, is instead of having it dramatized in you detouring into backstory. Now you can make it exciting, but it is a detour and a flashback. They are useful, they're wonderful, but just be aware that if your story's going like this, a detour into flashback has to be carefully crafted or it will derail your forward momentum. Tools to release suspense, humor. The guy's going into the haunted house. He goes up the stairs step by step. The cat comes out on the landing, okay? Or somebody, or a clown pops out and says, boo, and he realizes it's his girlfriend. Okay, so we've got humor. Distraction, the phone rings, false alarm, cat on the stairs. Establish the strings you can pull later. You can have things that seem safe early in your book and that turn out to be ominous later. I remember there's a Sue Grafton novel in which in one scene early in the book, Kinsey Malone is hiding behind a Pepsi machine. You know how it would be oozing hot air and dust on you. And she hears this guy, the cowboy boots on the macadam outside, and she realizes that it's a man, it's a big man. She's afraid it's the bad guy, but then she hears a child's voice laughing, and she realizes this guy has a little boy on his shoulders, and so she figures it's nothing. He's okay. And then later in the book, we find out that the bad guy has a child, a 4-year-old son. And so the alarm that didn't go off early in the book goes off in the reader's head later. So establish the strings you can pull later. When the bad thing happens, somebody gets killed, that releases suspense. Okay, especially if your narrator observes it. Release suspense with a realization and take a beat or two to sink in. You can release suspense by moving it to the next level. So if you're skulking around in a garage and you know that the bad guy is looking for you, and you're hiding, and then the guy, he comes out and you can see that he has a gun. So we're going to ratchet the suspense up. And suspense segues into action, of course. He starts running away from the garage, and then we have a flight or a flight and a chase. Okay, so think about going from establishing narrative to stuff happening. Think about going from high suspense to resolution and reflection, and think about the points in which you tip from one kind of feeling in your book to another. So those tipping points, slow down, take a moment of reflection, a few beats, white space, and go from things happening to reflection. So tipping points are where you use those short realization lines in your book. Okay, so I like to examine the tension in a book length work by using an outline. I do not outline my books much before, but I do outline them when I'm done with my first draft, because it's hard to see the forest for the trees. And by writing an outline, first of all, you make yourself go through the book and find the bones. So here's what one of my scene outlines would be. I try to keep track of the day and the time so that I don't have characters, going 8 days straight without having Saturday or Sunday. And I try to situate them in a year, so I use a calendar. And then I write what happened in the opening scene. So here's day 1, May 23rd, 1986, Friday, late, Arthur Unger swims laps. It starts with Arthur going for a swim. It ends with gets killed. So it's just the barest of the bare bones. And the second scene is continuous. It's the next morning. Arthur's daughter Deirdre drives home. It starts with her driving home. It ends with her finding the body in the pool. So what I'm doing is I'm stripping it down and trying to make sure that I've got hook and grab, hook and grab, hook and grab endings from scene to new scene that pull us forward. And when you do this, you can, well, you get past, the dense paragraphs. You can put down the blue pencil and stop editing your words. You want your story to be working. So another set of suggestions is read your manuscript out loud to yourself. I cannot tell you how many dumb things I have found in my books, cliches, things that don't make sense, things that are boring. If you're bored, your reader's going to be bored. Yeah. Assess the tension and release points. Make sure your scenes are building, hooking and grabbing. Are you hinting and revealing? Asking those questions, answering them strategically. And then sorting viewpoints and timelines. I really recommend that you only zigzag in time if you absolutely have to. It's hard to pull it off and make it work, and you don't want to lose your reader. I go nuts with a book that's got, every chapter begins with a day and a time and a narrator, and I'm supposed to be able to put the characters together with the timeline and I've seen it work, but it's tough. Make sure you're hinting and revealing strategically. And I think we're done. Look at that, 6:59. Do we have time for questions?
Sure. Let me quickly go through some of the comments, and a lot
Okay,
of it
good.
is been handled already. So we did share a link to the handout. I've been following along, and thank you for the handout because a lot of what was captured in the slides is nicely laid out. Otherwise, I'd be writing furiously. So we have the link in there. And then a couple of folks are having a little trouble with the screen, so we're trying to address that a little bit. And then a couple of folks did have to leave, so they're saying thank you, thank you. Folks put in a lot of suggestions on where they would break the paragraph that you had, the lights out or waking up in the ambulance. And then we shared the link to a couple of people. So the question I have here was the Lee Child article was that you mentioned, was that from New York Times or New Yorker?
I thought it was the New York Times,
New York Times, okay.
but I could be wrong. I will look it up after and send it to Kate.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, there's a threads.com, Jeannie suggesting a lot of folks are there, writers are sharing information on that particular social media. But yeah, I've got agreement here on reading your manuscript aloud is an absolute revelation and frequently humbling. Thank you, Betsy, for that. A lot of thank yous to you, Doug, Daniela, Jeannie, others are thanking you, finding a lot of value in this. So thank you so much, Hallie.
Good. Okay, great.
Maybe we can stop the share quickly and just ask if anyone wants to say a couple words.
Here.
Yeah, maybe just, yeah, there you go. I have to tell you that this was one of the largest groups that we've had in a crime chat, so kudos to you. Any questions from anyone?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Jeffrey. Yeah.
Hallie, when you end a chapter on a question, but you have 2 points of view, how often do you actually change to the other point of view before you answer the question in the following scene or chapter?
Oh boy, that is a prickly question. Here's the thing. I am a devotee to the mantra, every scene has one narrator, period. I cannot make it work with more than one. When I've tried, and I have tried, it's so confusing to the reader what sentences are coming out of which character's head. So I always limit it to one character within a scene. I once asked Tess Gerritsen how she decides which of her 2 main characters narrate a scene. And she said she likes to make the one narrating the one who is least comfortable. So I would never have that problem because it's hard enough switching narrators between scenes. But to try to do it within a scene, I just feel like that way is disastrous. Very confusing for the reader. Just as it's hard to write, it's hard to read.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
But back to what I said at the beginning, that's my opinion, okay? So that's not to say someone else can't make it work. I can.
Great. I have a rule of thumb too, and that's if I have to choose a POV, it's the character who gets the surprise. Other questions, folks? Or can we say thank you? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hallie, this has been great. Appreciate you so much. So much great content packed in here. I've been writing furiously, and then I realized it's already in the handout. Thank
It's in the
you.
handout, and my book is full of stuff like this. So writing and selling your mystery novel.
great.
by
I was going to say, I really recommend that book. It really is, that's been the Bible for a lot of people. It's excellent.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Nev. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it
you.
all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.